Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Hoster Tully has always known and expected for his daughters to be great. He is right in a way. His beautiful eldest, Catelyn Stark, is now wife to the Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell, and her heirs would be one with Tully blood on the north, the largest region of Westeros. His second daughter is wedded to Jon Arryn, Lord of the Vale and Hand of the King. Sure, she had been a disappointment before, but now that she remembered her duty to family and country, she also made him proud. Now all that's needed for her is to bear an heir worthy of both Arryn and Tully bloodline. A bloodline that will rule the Vale and the Eyrie for centuries to come. Thinking about it alone in his solar makes Hoster over the moon. After all that haggling, fighting, quarreling, and breaking deals under the table, the time of the Tullys of Riverrun have come in history of the Seven Kingdoms. Of course, not everything is well and off. His brother remains a widower and taking pleasure guarding the Bloody Gate as its knight. As far as Hoster is concerned, the Blackfish, despite his reputation as a warrior, is no better than a disappointment for being the bloody guard of a rather decaying gatehouse. He should be trying his damnedest to improve House Tully's progress and reputation instead of running around with a sword in his hip. Any fool with a sword can do what he does. Don't get him started on his son. Edmure also. The boy is 19 already, and the moron doesn't have a lick of sense in him. Sure, he attends his lessons and is rather rudimentary with his skills with the sword. He is shit on the bow, though, and don't get him started on his riding skills. All in all, he is shaping to be a poorly replacement Lord of Rev, the Riverrun in the event that something bad happened to Hoster. Normally, Hoster would wait until some of Catelyn or Lysa's second or third sons come of age to check on their growth before deciding who to name the next Lord of Riverrun. There is, however, one issue. Disappointed for the rather abysmal performance of his son at one of the new King Robert's tourneys being unseated by a newly minted knight who looks half drunk, Hoster, in a fit of despair and shame, got himself rather drunk and lost his way to one of the brothels at King's Landing. Lo and behold, 9 months later, and said whore appeared at his doorstep in the middle of the night at Riverrun, carrying a bundle and linen before leaving. And that is how Hoster Tully got himself a third daughter, Delana Tully, in his old age. Hoster would wonder himself, why in the world did he not throw the bastard girl to the moat the very second he got her? Normally, he would do so. Bastards were born of sin, and he just won a war. The last thing he needed was for his name to be tainted. Worse, for some reason he cannot fathom. He even called the favor from Robert Baratheon about helping him win the war in order to fully legitimize the bastard girl. The next morning he got her. Part of Hoster wondered if he was bewitched back then before kicking himself for thinking such nonsense. Magic is not real in this part of the world. Only stories and legends from a bygone age. Still, what's done is done, and Delana Rivers became Delana Tully in a fortnight. And that is why Hoster Tully is thinking so much right now. Delana in every way is not normal. Being able to read and write at the tender age of 3 and able to recite the entire Book of Lords of Riverrun without missing what house, which lord belonged to. It impressed the current maester so much that he even sent a recommendation to the Citadel, a thing extremely unheard of since only boys are allowed to be maesters. Worse, she was only 3. Hoster, of course, thought that the Citadel would refuse due to those reasons alone, but lo and behold, they accepted, and his bastard daughter left for 2 years there to be tested about her talents. He had expected that he would see her again in a month, but once more she achieved the impossible for not only being able to earn the right to study there, but also got private access to the hidden halls that were only reserved for archmaesters. Hoster was bewildered as she read the letter with the Citadel seal on it. Not only did she got the former archmaster of mathematics, science, agriculture, and philosophy kicked off by beating them in the 3-day session debates, she also introduced enough ideas that changed the Citadel thinking that women might also contribute something to the wellspring of knowledge. When she returned after 2 years, Hoster was faced not with a child, but a mature girl. She literally commandeered nearly every aspect of running the business sector of the Riverlands, and strong-armed the leadership role of the castle from him. These days, all Hoster does is sit on his solar or at the banquet hall thinking, eating, and meeting the other lords of Riverrun to reminisce old times as his daughter do whatever she wants. A large part of Hoster fervently believes that the heir that he has been seeking out is literally in front of him, and he needs not search any further. There is another part of him, however, that also refuses to accept this truth, no matter what he does. History of Westeros had proven time and time again why it is a bad idea for women to lead. Worse still, a bastard being named a successor for a Lord Paramount. Yes. For now, he will withhold his judgment, and Edmure will be his heir. There is still time for his son to pull his head out of the gutter. He hopes. If somebody would tell Harry Potter, wizard extraordinaire, the man who conquered, the legendary aura that brought down budding Dark Lords, Quidditch three-time world champion, Vila's choice, leader of the magical resistance, and bringer of peace of two worlds, that he would be bodily transported out of his rather luxurious lifestyle of a pseudo-billionaire, into this medieval world, where there is even a lack of proper restroom, he might have willingly committed by Avada Kedavra at Voldemort's hand twice. He had been lounging on his rather exquisite Jackadoozy bathtub, enjoying the pleasures of life after ending the war between Muggle and Magical with a blood treaty, when he was summarily pulled out of his timeline into a tube and only got a few seconds to be given by death. How to be reborn in a new life. A. Old man trapped in a tree with roots growing inside him. Oh fuck no. Or B. Baby girl with a future having a hot body. While drool-worthy, he can't help the double take at the gender switch option. Of course, death being the asshole it is, the moment it finished speaking, it had consumed nearly the entirety of the time with his explanation about how this world needs a savior, and he was his best option. Thus Harry Potter the Great only had a split second to decide between trapped old man and soon-to-be hot girl. He had literally swallowed his pride by choosing the latter. That means bye-bye to his precious down below. Of course, death, as usual, is a moron, and instead of giving him a highborn life, he was born as a bastard, and from a whore of all people. He might have accepted being the dally result of his Lord Father Fishboy and a noble woman, but a whore? Seriously? If being a bastard at this new prejudiced world was already a bad thing, being born a bastard of a whore was much, much worse. Emergency situations need emergency action. Thus, without preamble, and despite the fact that his magic was wild due to him being babyfied, he had literally thrown the most sharp compulsion at Holster Tully's head in order to prevent him from making Harry an impromptu swim after her mother gave her to her father. He had no wish to know what moat water tastes like, thank you very much. Thus begun Harry's life in Riverrun as Delana Tully. He had to give himself brownie points for compulsing Hoster Tully again into naming him into his Skyrim avatar's name. Might not be as scary as Voldemort's name, but hey, he's a girl and going to be a hot one if Death's future picture might be taken into account. First things first, though, as far as Harry is concerned, what he, or in this case now, a she needs is a power base. If she was born as a highborn, it might not have been a problem being the daughter of the Lord of Riverrun, but she was a bastard, and everyone knows it. Thus, once more, compulsion is the key, and her father went running to Robert Baratheon to legitimize her. Of course, she knows by more mind reading that this move of hers was barely a step forward. A legitimized bastard was still barely a step up by a bastard. No, what she needed was to build her name that the other lords and ladies of Westeros might point higher than their stigma of bastardry. It's not that hard for her as far as she's concerned. Her brother, the heir Edmure Tully, was a fool, and lacked with zero ambition. It would not even be an effort for her to overtake him. Thus begun Delana Tully's road to greatness. The lords of Westeros might be lords now, but they all started on something. It is their repute and achievement that gave them their titles and names. Delana would do the same. She will build her name so high that even the great Aegon Targaryen's name would be overshadowed by hers. That is why, at once, she must put her stance to that of being invaluable. Easy, the old adage of knowledge is power applies here perfectly. After shamelessly mind-reading every single being that lived here at Riverrun while still being babyfied, Delana almost cackled in glee at the information she had gleaned. Knowledge was lacking in this world thousands of years, and the people barely made any advancement into anything, living like traditional peons, repeating the same song again and again. Maesters, guardians of knowledge, were the only ones that can even be put into something more than being literate. The highborn themselves were barely a step up from being learned, and the small folk did not even know how to read and write. Thus, Dillana had her first goal. She would soar in the realms of knowledge and be something that this world had never seen. It was no hard effort for her to impress the Maester of Riverrun at the age of 3, when she was learning her letters while raised as the child of Hoster Tully, alongside some of the fostered heirs here at Riverrun. She had to paint the image of her progressing so far as to even memorizing the Book of Lords in one go. Of course, it's not that hard answering his questions when she can read the answers at his brain like an open book. With a mild confundus charm, she was able to influence the Maester enough to put her as a candidate to visit Oldtown, despite her being a girl. She had to place the confundus due to his reluctance of her gender, which no amount of knowledge can change. Thus, after literally enchanting the letters with the most powerful rune-activated compulsion charms that react when the letters were opened, the letters were sent, she had to make sure to add those in order to bamboozle the old farts there. Some of them might have strong minds to resist the basic influencing charm, and Dillana was not taking any chances of them saying no. It worked like magic. No pun intended. The reply from the Citadel was quick and precise, and a month after Dillana sent those letters, she was on her way to Oldtown to be tested about her gift of knowledge. Of course, there are 2 reasons as to why Dillana is going on the so-called knowledge trove of Westeros, other than proving her mettle of being a once-in-a-thousand-year genius. First is the simple fact that she wanted to avoid the 2-year baby thigh regimen of Westerosi ladies by Septa slowly molding their brains that they be nothing more than glorified housewives and broodmares. Dillana had heard enough simply by reading minds. Thank you very much. Second is she wanted to know what in the world happened to magic in this world. It felt as if someone siphoned it off, leaving literally nothing. Long and bitter experience as Harry Potter the Great made him more than aware of the simple fact that all legends had an ingrain of truth in them. Westeros had more than one legend supporting each other. The truth was hidden, and he wanted to know why. On a more personal matter at hand, he simply wanted to read books and enjoy the next 2 years rather than listening to the repetition as to how beautiful and wonderful it is to marry a knight and be all submissive and stuff. Plus, he also wanted to try out his hand in writing a book, despite being abysmal about doing it, and she also needs time to get acquainted with her new gender and all the challenges it brings. Vanishing shit in secret is also much easier than using the privy. Long story short, he, or rather she, literally turned the Oldtown Maesters upside down. She answered every question they had for her when she first arrived. She beat them at their debates, discussing ideas and philosophies that made many of them cross-eyed. She declared to them simple basic facts of science, mathematics, philosophy, and the power of language and religion, gravity, basic algebra, geometry, physics, statistics, words of wisdom, heavily plagiarized, earth science, history lessons, and socialism she discussed in depth to them during her first few weeks. Simple subjects taught as general lessons by schools back home. The result was 6 archmasters kicked out, a couple more demoted, a horde of fans and admirers from the acolytes, and a unique once-in-a-time-only invitation from the Citadel granting her free access of learning to its halls despite having tits and a cunt. Sexist bastards. Thus, for the next 2 years, Dillana stayed at Oldtown basking on the admiration of hers, truly, from everyone there. Many, in fact, were grumbling that she would not be given a chance to be part of the Maesters. She, however, was given the chance to forge her chain links as proof of her stay there. She was 6 years old when she left, with many a plead from the Citadel for her to stay for her home back at Riverrun. To say that the reception she got when she arrived was a mixed one. On one hand, some of the more pragmatic Riverlords were astonished and were more welcoming to her presence, seeing the benefits of having a powerful force of nature at their good graces. The more traditional at the opposite side were wary of her, the history of bastards rising above their stations, giving off warning bells inside their heads. The story of the Blackfire Rebellion, after all, was a well-known sample of bastards taking something that didn't belong to them. Her father, however, was over the moon for her about it. Hoster might be an opportunistic bastard, but he had a good eye when locating someone worth noticing. Despite the fucker originally planning to ditch her at Dirty Moat Water, she needed him at the time being. Thus, with her newfound renown and reputation, plus the shining credentials, forged links always on display, cough 2 acts, it was not hard of Dillana to take over the finances and managing of Riverrun, Normally, it is Admir's duty running Riverrun, especially with Hoster getting on in age. However, the supposed-to-be heir was more concerned with going out chasing girls and hanging out with the other rambunctious young lords. Dillionite didn't even have to use magic to convince the man-child to run off to enjoy his time. Of course, many protested by her sudden taking over of power. None, however, wanted to be in the place of being the glorified manager and accountant. Thus it falls to her and only her. Now here she is, looking over the finances and the stuff that makes Riverrun run, to say the least. Dillionite isn't happy, other than the fact that the castle lacked a sewage system. She really misses toilets. Riverrun might be a step up from the hovel of the medieval ages. But emphasis, though, on medieval ages, born and bred on modern society. Dillionite wants her old comforts back. Sure, she might not have all of them, but she wants most of them back. Especially the food. Food in Westeros is bland and lacks creativity, even for the High Lords. Fish tastes like fish, meat tastes like meat, fruit to fruit, and that's it. She can't take it anymore. Grumbling to herself, she uses her 6-year-old small hands to open the ledgers that account everything of the Riverlands. To say the least, she isn't pleased. Riverrun is literally the second poorest house of Westeros, next only to the Northerners and their frigid, icy homes. Being the battlefield of the warring houses throughout the centuries had done no favors to the land and the people. Add the fact that House Tully has literally zero renown other than the weird fish sigil in the Seven Kingdoms. The only reason they're not the first is because, like the Reach, the Riverlands also have farmlands whose produce they sell mostly north. Other than that, though, and the fish, they have nothing to be proud of. The Northerners are well known for their hardness. They are respected as warriors despite being called barbarians. The Westlanders are rich, period. The Reachers are the lauded knights, the heart of chivalry. The Stormlanders are the best seamen in Westeros, second only to the Ironborn and well known for their loyalty and quick temper. The Crownlanders are the professional army of the royal throne and its levies. The Dornish have never been conquered. The Valaman are the best knights in the realm. The Riverlanders, on the other hand, have fish. Chibi scream. The hold of the Paramount is less than ideal, with many houses stronger than it, literally ignoring what generations of Lord Tullys command them to do. All in all, it is a slugfest mashup of a community, each fighting for his own, with literally no true loyalty to its Paramount, Lord. The only reason they doesn't yet is because the Tullys has the backing of the crown by the Targaryens before, and now by the Baratheons. Closing the book in anger, Dillionite stomps towards the windows, where she can see the entirety of the Riverlands. Yes, a clean slate and Harry Potter the Great would make this middle-aged hovel-formed country, to his or this case, her new playground. And here are the ledgers that you asked for, my lady. Milo, the castle's head servant, says, placing the rather large book that records the general information of the Riverlands. Thank you, Dillionite smiles at the old man, who bows at her words. Unlike the high lords of the Riverlands, the small folk rather admire her for her talents and rising from nothing to the unofficial Lord Paramount, seeing that Hoster is old and Edmure is still being Edmure. Dillionite makes it a point to be kind to them. There is power in gaining the respect of the larger populace. The more you're kind to the downtrodden, the more they'll repay it in the long run. The history of humanity back home has proven this truth time and time again. Sure, there is power in gaining the respect of the lords and barons of a realm. The true power a king, or in this case a lord paramount, might have is however found on the people, and Dillionite makes it a point to attain that one way or the other. It is, however, a work in progress and Dillionite's long-term project. Your father expressed his intention that you visit him at his solar for the midday meal, my lady, Mello informs her. I'll be there meanwhile, thank you, Dillionite smiles at the old man who bows before exiting her solar.
Now truly alone, Dillionite opens the ledger that contains all the information that she needs about the Riverlands. To have a solution, what she needs is to specifically identify the problems and their root causes. Only then will she be able to tackle it. No point implementing reforms and changes and find out embarrassingly at the end that there's no need for it anyway. If she plans to turn this mud hovel issue that she's changing into something, then she needs to be extra smart about this.
It takes Dillionite an hour or two to fully peruse the ledger of the past Riverlords. She might have finished sooner, but for whatever reason, the previous Riverlords are not exactly the best. When detailing their thoughts into paper, resulting into a jumbled mess of information that one can only see when dealing with elementary students. As it is, Dillana leans on her rather hard wooden chair, only alleviated by some folded robes that she asked the servants to place there before. She makes a mental note to introduce feather-filled cushions soon, as her mind starts to think. For hundreds of years under the Targaryen rule, the Tully's rule of the Riverlands is soft and comfortable. However, despite siding with Robert Baratheon during the rebellion, the influence of the Tullys are becoming more and more unstable. Bandits and thieves are becoming more prominent in activity, thanks to the rather lack of action and implementation of the Master of Laws of Westeros. Inside the Riverlands, there is the continuing power struggle between House Frey and House Lannister, who ironically almost have the same power and influence as House Tully. There is also the ever-present dispute between the Blackwoods and the Brackens. There's also the silent Targaryen supporters, most notably of all, House Derry, who scorns the name of Tully. She also fails to notice the threat that the overambitious Golden Lion of the West, whose influence is like a plague infecting many of the Riverlords, buying off their loyalty piece by piece. There is simply no harmony on the Riverlands, with High Lords barely having control of their own lands. Her father, the Old Fish, is aware of these problems. But inability to travel far, old age, past wounds, and lack of family and male support throughout the years has made him quite weak and helpless. Sure, he has tried to restore order, but with zero renown, lack of an ace in the hole, and a soft reputation ends his efforts in failure before it even manages to start. Edmure and Brynden are no better. As far as she's concerned, Edmure is a man-child who would kiss his reflection on the river if someone dared him, and Brynden is a petty outcast who wants nothing to do with his familial blood due to insults through the ages. The only thing that the Tullys have at the moment is their alliance with both the North and the Vale. Having both of its daughters as wives for two Lord Paramounts have brought unmeasured goodwill, treaties, and benefits for the Tullys and secure their power a little bit more against the other river lords. Delana hums to herself, wondering how she would start. At first, she might have gone with her first instinct of simply developing Riverrun and all its surrounding lands. It would be quite easy if she's going to be honest. The land around Riverrun is fertile and does not have any village or town, merely empty space. It would be a good start for her to build her base of operations. Now that she thinks about it, though, it would be a very bad idea on her part. For starters, if she does something like this 9 times out of 10, her achievements would be claimed by Hulster Tully, or worse, Edmure. She is a bastard after all, despite being a legitimized one. No, not even the hint of any possibility of them taking credit will she suffer. Time is a precious thing, and the last thing she wants to waste. Plus, now that she's thinking, Dillionite is realizing that she doesn't need to be Lord Paramount of the Riverlands herself. There are more ways to be at the top other than sitting on a chair and be bombarded by paperwork and responsibilities. Yes, she can get the former and ignore the latter. What she needs, though, is space. Lots of space. Lady Sheila Wynn would be the first to admit that she is the last of the Winds of Harrenhal. In a way, it is not surprising. No other lord would dare try and live on the ruined castle, now filled with nothing but memories, silence, and ghosts. Still, once her family, the Wents, lived here and tried their damnedest to live, someone, after all, must be Lord of Harrenhal and secure the roads that pass through the Green Isle. Now all that is left of the Wents is her, and she is old and dying. Imagine her surprise when out of nowhere, the renowned bastard daughter of Lord Tully, the one who is rumored to be brilliant, and even allowed at Oldtown, appear out of nowhere, proposing to her, not only to inherit the giant ruined castle that her and her family had taken care at the best of their abilities, but also restore it. Sheila Went is both relieved and skeptical. He has always expected that once she died, this castle would be given to one of the hedge knights that would not even make an effort of staying here out of fear of the ghost of Harren and his sons. Then all that her family had striven for throughout the years would be for naught. Now here comes one, voluntarily, mind you, not only telling her that she will live on it, but also repair it. She can't believe the audacity that the bastard of 6.5-year-old girl is bringing to her. If asked a few years later what made her say yes to the proposition that the bastard of Lord Tully is bringing to the table, Sheila Wynn won't be able to fully explain. All she knew that when she looked at those piercing green eyes of the Tully, she saw not only the truth that she will do what she promised to do, but even go beyond it. On those eyes she saw greatness, and then the legacy of her family would continue to stand stronger and firmer than before. Thus, with her consent and by her decree, Sheila signs the paperwork alongside with her seal naming Delana Tully as the next Lady of Harrenhal after her coming of age. She will still be living in the castle until her dying day, but the finances, the running, the small villages, the people, and the large tract of land that belongs to the Lady of Harrenhal would all fall under the purview of Delana Tully and all her heirs. In a way, in one simple confundus charm, Delana Tully has taken her first step on building her power base in this new world. All hail Harry the Great. 4 weeks, that is the timetable that Delana has transferring everything that she owns from Riverrun to Harrenhal. Her leaving, suffice it to say, is a cause of sensation for Riverrun. Already gossips and made-up stories about why she's leaving are circulating around the castle like bonfire. Of course, to give herself a little bit of amusement and excitement, Delana herself started the rumors that the main reason she is leaving is because the Lord Hoster Tully wants his son Edmure to handle the affairs of the Riverlands instead of her. Of course, this rumor results into several backfires to the current ruling regime. The lords, after all, of the Riverlands are divided in opinion when it comes about Hoster Tully's bastard daughter. While many of them are rather doubtful and skeptical of her due to her former status as a bastard, none of them, however, can deny that she does good work when it comes to managing the affairs of the Riverlands during her brief tenure as pseudo-lord for her father. Frankly, majority of the lords of the Riverlands would not rather have Edmure manage the paramount responsibilities. Last time the man-boy was put in charge by his father, he had mixed up 2 betrothal letters, nearly causing a civil war on the Riverlands, as the 2 families who arrived for the set date of the wedding were not the families that both bride and groom expected. The result was a lot of angry river lords at the future heir, and would have hamstrung him if not for the arrival of a royal edict from the hand of the king, John Arryn, to maintain the peace, else face the displeasure of the crown. Thus, on this happy note, Delana leaves with Hoster Tully once more, taking over the responsibilities of his station as Lord Paramount until Edmure returns. Correction, if he ever returns from the countryside with his friends. Now here she is, sitting on the large but empty solar of the former Lady Wen, who have taken residence on one of the rooms on the lower levels to spare her old knees. The pain of walking up and down to say that Delana is pleased with her current progress is the understatement of the century. There's a good reason, after all, why she chose Harrenhal as her base of operations and home. For starters, what she needs above all, currently, is secrecy to hide her magic. The last thing she wanted is to waste even more time dealing with angry faith followers protesting at her door for being a wizard or witch. Now, in her case, on the other hand, it would be extremely fun to watch lords and ladies of the realm try to crack their heads wondering how she does things. The other reason she chose Harrenhal is the fact that it is filled with ghosts and unable to rest spirits. Many died here during the burning of the castle during Aegon's conquest of Westeros, with many not even knowing that they are under attack of Aegon's dragon before being turned to a crisp. Their spirits now are wandering in this castle, unseen by anyone not magical. They would be essential, literally, for Delana's plans long term. Basically, they would be fuel for transmutation. She doesn't plan to play fair, after all, in her soon coming to be rise of greatness. The cornerstone of any success is money, after all, with lots of it. And currently, her purse, other than the small stipend her father gave her, is literally zero. She'll need millions of golden dragons for her plans, and she's got a plan for it. What she needs, though, is the wizarding art of transmutation. Transfiguration is all great and stuff, but any transfigured item has the tendency to transform back to its original form in a given set amount of time. Transmutation, however, does not. One of the key ingredients of transmutation, though, is wandering spirits. They tend to be used as batteries for the spell work. Time to implement her next step, though. While it would be easy to transmute rocks into mountains of gold, It would be suspicious as hell for anyone with a brain to notice that the once pauper bastard suddenly became a millionaire overnight. No, what she needs is a startup income that would be big enough that she can then cheat her way through trying to grow it through various investments. Raising her hand in the window, Delana focuses her magical power in her fingertips with a very specific target in mind. Action Brightro. Tywin Lannister does not run. Yes, he never runs for nothing, is important enough or bad enough to force the powerful Lion of the Rock to indulge themselves as something desperate as running. What he is doing right now, though, is not running, but rather fast walking. Yes, he is certainly not running just fast walking as he runs to the treasury, followed alongside by his brother Kevin Lannister, who is running, I meant fast walking behind. Today was supposed to be a normal day for the Lion of the Rock. He would manage his affairs and the affairs of the Westerlands. He would read the important reports that came from his spies all over Westeros. He would send a few threatening messages to those he believed were rather being uppity among his vassals. He would insult the imp with a few choice words, and he would read the usual loan reports from the crown asking for more to indulge Robert's excessive lifestyle. All in all, a good day's work for Tywin Lannister, the most powerful man in Westeros. So imagine his surprise when out of nowhere this morning, a letter by Raven came from Riverrun bearing the sigil of the Tully Seas. Tywin never thought much of the Tully Seas. Personally, he detested them, Lord Paramounts who barely cling to power and only surviving through the generosity of the crown. It reminded him too much of his father who almost led House Lannister to ruin. On the other hand, he's relieved that they're not as aggressive or as influential as the Tyrells or the Dornish. It is one least headache for him when it comes into securing the crown for his grandson. So he cannot fathom the reason as to why the Tullys would send a message to him directly. Curiosity of his won, and he read the letter. That is the reason why he is fast walking towards his treasury right now. For all his life, Tywin Lannister had always striven to bring House Lannister glory and prestige. The symbol, however, for prestige of all houses is a Valyrian steel weapon. All the great houses at least have one. Even smaller houses, in fact, also have House Lannister. Unfortunately, for all its wealth and power, have failed to procure even a single one, and for good reason. Valyrian steel weapons are so closely guarded by houses and passed normally from generation to generation. Brightroar is House Lannister's house sword before King Tommen of the Rock lost it during his travel to Valyria. At least that's how the tales go. Tywin himself had offered a steady promise of money of at least 1,000,000 gold dragons for anyone willing to sell him a Valyrian steel sword for his house. No one answered the auction, and even he had thought of it as a dead end throughout the years. Now here comes this letter bearing the official seal of the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, signed by one Dillionite Tully, the renowned female genius bastard of Hoster Tully, claiming that she not only have a Valyrian steel sword, but Brightroar itself. She is willing to give it to him in exchange for double the amount of his promise. The old lion is not one to trust explicitly the words of a letter, but the official seal of the Lord Paramount on a letter is something that proves that this is not a scam. Wars had been fought for less, and the Riverlands cannot hope to stand against the Lannisters in 100 years. Normally, Tywin would have refused such double demand for someone of his station. The lure, however, of acquiring not only some random Valyrian steel sword, but Brightroar itself, the ancestral weapon of House Lannister, is too much not to resist. Besides, it's not as if he cannot recover the gold that he would be spending. The Lannister mines are providing gold as ever, and 2,500,000 gold dragons might take a while to recover, but they would recover. The reason, however, that Tywin is currently now sitting on the solar of the treasury, as his brother and his most trusted men count the gold that they need for the payment, is because of the fact that Tywin is insisting on not delaying. The last thing that Tywin needs is for the former bastard to think that he is not agreeing to her exchange and start to auction Brightroar off. Tywin, of course, knows that he is not the only one searching for a Valyrian weapon. There are many others like him searching also. And the last thing that he needs right now is for the priceless heirloom of House Lannister fell at the grubby hands of someone else. Kevin and the rest of his men, though, have to blink in surprise as they now also notice the esteemed Tywin Lannister helping them fill the bags of gold like a common servant while urging them to move as fast as they could. "Bring that stone over there and find me that carpenter from before," Delana commands to the foreman, who bows his head repeatedly before running off to follow her order. It had been 6 months, ever since her rather large amount of payment from the Lord of Casterly Rock. Part of her, of course, had expected that the Lannister Lord might back out of the deal and instead send assassins or an army to reclaim what is his. She had heard and read enough about Tywin Lannister to know the man's reputation and brutality on those that he felt had slighted him. 2,500,000 gold dragons, after all, was no small sum. In her state as a 6-year-old, her magic was not yet strong enough to sustain heavy usage in the event that the Old Lion sent an army. So she did some countermeasures of her own just in case, to avoid the eventual fate of poor Rhaenys Targaryen, who was stabbed 100 times by Armory Lorch. She sent missives and messages to every surrounding house about the fact that she found Bright Roar buried at the waters of the Green Isle. That was an out-and-out lie, of course. She personally had no idea where Bright Roar came from, only the fact that it was encased in cold magma and she had spent nearly an entire night chipping away the hardened covering with reductos before it was presentable again. Color her surprise that the reply of the Lord of the Rock came not 2 days ago. Nearly a small army of Lannister Red Cloaks, with Tywin's brother Kevan Lannister, entered Harrenhal's ruined courtyard, sending the few terrified smallfolk that call Harrenhal home skittering to the countryside in fear. With them, however, is 3 wagons full of gold dragons and other expensive items that can be translated to the promised amount. While part of her was relieved that the Old Lion sent the money instead of an execution squad, she did not, however, expect the rather large bonus of another 500,000 dragons from the Old Lion. As Lord Kevan Lannister so aptly stated, "We Lannisters pay our debts, and giving to us Bright Roar and not simply any Valyrian steel sword owed our house to you a lot. Also, my brother wanted to extend this gift as a courtesy that in the event you luck out on any more Valyrian-made weapons and stuff, he would be willing to purchase it. Suffice it to say that she gained respect for the Old Lion. Yes, he might be manipulative, cunning, and an all-around evil bastard when it came into dealing with his enemies, but he did honor his debts. As far as Delana is concerned, that only made him human. It was what any human might do also if given power to fight against those he recognized as enemies. The Old Lion plays the game of life well, and he plays to win. Delana can respect that, for she also plans to play the same way. Still with the money she gained, she had every excuse now to create her own gold through transmutation, and no one would be the wiser about how she got her money. It would be hard to argue the investment returns of a woman who just got 3 million gold dragons after all. Now, one might ask as to why she simply didn't create a Philosopher's Stone to make her own gold. The answer was simple. It takes an absurd amount of time, 3 years to be exact, to bind the spirits that would be used as fuel in the creation of a Philosopher's Stone. There were equations and glyphs that needed to be followed during the continuing spellbinding and fueling that must be done continuously and meticulously. Any mistake on her part during the process would result to a mushroom cloud explosion that would flatten everything around Harrenhal in a 20-kilometer radius. There's a good reason why anyone other than the mad genius Nicholas Flamel had attempted creating one. He, Harry the Great, also had one, but not after nuking himself 3 times on 3 different islands of the Pacific. Mind you, it attracted enough attention that the eye of every world power navy was aimed there. Thus, transmutation is the key for now. Why bother exploding yourself up so soon when it is a simple flick of the wrist and a screaming poor sod of a soul is consumed to transform a pile of broken rocks into gold? Harrenhal fortunately has a lot of rocks, simply littering, and many of them are larger than her. Simple reductos tend to break them up nicely, and voila, gold. Back to the present though. It never surprises Delana how amiable and obedient the small folk of this world are, compared to the sheeple back home. Here, if a person of power commands them to jump, their answer would be, how high, instead of the usual, why should I, back home. Frankly, for Delana, it is a bit refreshing to be obeyed without grumbling. Thus, the next facets of her step to being the great again are taken. One might have expected that she might follow the usual tradition of those having the luck of inheriting fertile lands from their ancestors. Delana, however, isn't like anyone. No, she is Harry the Great, and where everyone sees in one direction, she will take the road that no one sees or expects. Quinn is a simple young man, and he lives a simple life as his father, and his father before him. Their family is farmers throughout the generations. They live and serve whoever is the Lord or Lady of Harrenhal, tilling their fields and giving the majority of it to the castle while taking a tithe for themselves to live by. He has 7 brothers and 2 sisters. Together they work one of the largest fields near the castle proper while being protected by the men-at-arms there against any bandits and raiders. In a way, Quinn knows that his family is one of the lucky ones. Lady Sheila is a gracious lady and tend to leave the small folk on their own devices as long as they don't cause any trouble. Not many lords are like that, who usually takes pleasure of making the life of their small folk hard. So when the new Lady of Harrenhal is announced, you can say Quinn is a bit worried. Change of the seat of power always results to something bad. Still, he can do nothing. He is part of the small folk of Harrenhal and his place to serve his lord, or in this case, lady. Like everyone else, they know who Lady Delana Tully is, though. The beautiful bastard daughter of Lord Hoster Tully, who is said to be a genius, and even went to the Citadel to learn the secrets of the maesters, beating many of them in terms of brilliance. She also is the interim paramount of the Riverlands, for a time, and word among the grapevine is many of the lords prefer having her around rather than Lord Edmure Tully. Still, she is a woman, and as far as Quinn is concerned, it is unnatural for a woman to be trying her hand on the things meant for men. Women are supposed to be just good mothers and housewives, submitting to the will of their husbands, just like her mother who raised and cared for all of them. Barely a few weeks after Lady Tully came to power, though, the thing that Quinn dreaded started: change. She introduced to them new plants and new tools that they would use for planting. She introduced to them the use of the plow, something called irrigation, where one must build small waterways on your fields so that water might flow from the nearby river, so that there won't be any need anymore to carry buckets full of water when irrigating the field. It all made Quinn's head spin, alongside many of the head farmers attending. The guards beside Lady Tully are simply nodding their heads to her words, but he gets a sneaking suspicion that they are simply putting an act. Judging by their cross-eyed looks, they are as confused as he is. It is the new seeds, though, that made Quinn apprehensive. Many of the farmers are confused as she ordered them, to plant these new seeds instead of the usual wheat, rye, and barley that are the main staple food for Westeros. These seeds are nothing they have ever seen before, and when they started asking, she explained to them that they are something called spices, something that will be extremely useful for flavoring and preserving food. Quinn, of course, mentally frowned at that. He has never heard of a plant preserving or giving another food taste before. She also introduced to them something called rice, a new kind of plant that would be a substitute for their usual fare as farmers. Of course, being she, the Lady of Harrenhal, they cannot simply say their worries and protest. Besides, it is the lords and ladies' prerogative to do the thinking, and the small folk simply do the working. They would have followed anyways. They earn their living, after all, for their produce rather than their opinion. So when the Lady Tully declared that they keep majority of their produce and only give a tithe to the castles as tax, it caught everyone off guard. Even with Lady One's kindness, life as a small folk is hard. With majority of your goods donated to the castle and only a tithe remaining for yourself, it is extremely hard to make do and at the same time pay the tax demanded by the Lord of the Riverlands. Many times, when harvest is poor, Quinn would be hungry with his family. The lords, after all, do not lessen the demand despite the lean harvest. It is how things are in Westeros. Now here's the new lady declaring to do the exact opposite. She asks only for a percentage of their harvest, but gently reminding them that they pay their usual tax percentage according to the success of their harvest. She also declared that she would be the one to buy their goods once harvest season come. Quinn almost cried at that. No more long journeys to large markets where your goods might spoil. You might get raided by bandits and killed. Or worse, some uppity noble might steal your stock while passing by and leave you with nothing. Thus, of course, many of them left that day in a favorably jolly and hopeful mood despite the new plants they are ordered to plant. It is not every day, after all, that you are told that your entire way of life has been turned upside down. Quinn just hopes that all these new changes that the Lady Tully is implementing about spices, rice, tools, and new market system not backfire on her badly. He would hate to see the noble that just freed him from the daily dose of hunger be replaced by someone worse. A year later, Quinn Basil would be raising his crystal-made glass filled with wine and blessing to Delana Tully's name every time. He's rich after all. And be careful with that stone. Make sure you wipe the cement well before placing it above the other. Delana orders, watching the nervous workers gingerly apply the wet cement between the bricks before gluing them with the next. So far, she had multiple projects running together. Of course, first and foremost of those is her investment about the new crop that she plans to exchange for the usual barley and wheat grown by the Westerosi. Why bother, after all, growing crops that have a high probability of competition with the Reach and the rest of the Riverlords, when she can grow crops that no one in Westeros have any idea would turn their world upside down? Spices, after all, are excellent food preservatives and extremely important in food cooking, something that this hovel world sucks about. She timed her introduction of spices to the farmers, of course, perfectly, just in time for the harvest festival of Riverrun, when she can make her grand reveal. Of course, for now, it is her secret. She knows, of course, that it would be a great success. The things she's planning, chive, thyme, cumin, mint, bay leaf, turmeric, basil, coriander, parsley, and saffron continues to be of great demand, even in the modern age. Earth history had shown that during the introduction of spices to the Europeans from the East, their worth is weight in gold. That's the reason why she offered to buy all the produce from her farmers. This way she would monopolize the trade and control the prices. She's not planning for any thieving lord getting her goodies and dividing competition, no sir. Her new implementation of the double farm system across the farmlands of Harrenhal for spice and rice production is fueled by two things. One, of course, for market of spice. Two, rice is extremely durable and does not spoil if kept well in a dry place. It would serve as a replacement for the there plain barley and wheat, which is the staple food of the land. It can be stockpiled in great amounts and can be used as a pair for any sort of meat. It would also go very well in partnership with the spice presentation he will do for the harvest feast. Other than the field of agriculture, Delana also expands in the field of construction and mining, years of untapped resources. Thanks to lack of knowledge of the empty lands of Harrenhal, have made the land extremely fertile in terms of soil resources. It is not much effort in her part to introduce cement to the builders. The Hammer and Stone Guild she hired from Braavos to slowly redesign and repair Harrenhal. The guild is well known for keeping their mouth shut when it comes to their employers, and Delana is hell-bent on keeping the ingredients for making cement or liquid rock, as the Bravosi and the rest of the small folk workers started to call it. Of course, no questions are asked about how she got the idea for it. She was, after all, a proven genius already. Most credited this invention of hers as something that her great intellect comes up about out of nowhere. She plans on selling this liquid rock later at absurdly high price once she fully opens to the world. Still, despite her startup project on making Harrenhal livable, this time with plumbing and the correct restroom qualities for good measure. No more privy for her, sir. It would take at least a couple of years before it is done. She had to enchant the stones beforehand to be more lightweight, else it would take a lifetime to finish. While the castle is still ongoing, Delana moves on, however, to her last target and probably the most important currently. The spice harvest will generate great dividends, however, its success would not be shown till after the harvest feast. Even then, the money she needs for the rest of her projects to come into fruition needs to be more enough to cover the fact that she can turn stone to gold. That's why she needs another set of income. One precious enough that will attract enough attention and reasoning of Harrenhal's sudden booming wealth. Usage of point-me and sensing spells about any possibility of gems, silver, or gold within the territory of Harrenhal has come out empty. It's not actually surprising. Harrenhal territory is composed of plains, large tracts of forests and swamps. Its geography is not simply suited for mining, but agriculture. That does not stop Delana, though. As said before, she loves to be unconventional when it comes to such things. Proper usage of application of arithmancy and transmutation at a hill, not far from Harrenhal, created basically what is a deep cave full of crystal diamonds. Unlike the regular diamond, though, it is multicolored in color and reflects light like 1,000 rainbows under the sun. At night, it would shine like a blue lantern as long as it is under the moon. It would be her unique offer to the Westerosi and be one of the pillars of the foundation of her wealth and prosperity. She plans to call it Dillionite in honor of hers truly. There is a good reason why naming things tend to be Hermione's field, since Harry, great or not, suck at it. She mentally cackles, of course. It is the beauty of magic, fooling muggles all the time. As far as Delana is concerned, there is nothing wrong with cheating. It is only wrong when you get caught doing it. Life is not sunshine and roses, and as far as Deliana Harry is concerned, long and bitter experience had taught him that during his past life as an Arahan, part-time Dark Lord cleaning volunteer, if the board is stacked against you and you find yourself pushed to the side, he learned that it is always better to rearrange the board instead of trying to find your way through it. I'll take my leave now, Master Builder. Deliana nods to the foreman in charge, who bows once more to her before leaving. Right now, the design for the upcoming soon-to-be castle of Harrenhal is yet non-existent. The builders are simply repairing the foundation, which is the most important part. The castle is humongous, and even the work in 5 months' time, even with the help of secret magic, can only afford the almost finishing of the foundation. Simply, personally, Deliana is still wondering what type of castle will she design for the new Harrenhal. She can either go full fantasy on it, or simply follow the old designs of humanity when building one. Despite all his experiences, after all, his knowledge of castles is simply non-existent. Maybe it's time to raid the Citadel again, for books about castles. The last thing she wants is to be squashed flat like a pinata by a broken wall due to bad design. Prioritize first, though, Deliana needs to prepare for the Harvest Feast. It is 4 months from now, and the enchanted soil of Harrenhal, which cost her 20 ghosts during the ritual of blessed life, would then be ready for the first spice and rice harvest for presentation. She frowns, though, as she looks at the mirror. She also needs to be ready for the presentation, and she can't do that looking like a cute, unassuming child of 6. No, if she needs to be ready for the Lords, she needs to look at least a little mature for her age, that the Lords will not coddle her and disregard her before she can speak. It would be a balance of looking a bit like her age, but be mature and awesome at the same time, permanently. She would be a bombshell in the future years, which she looks forward to, probably with a large mirror in front of her. But what she needs is to look mature and ready in the next 4 months. Being Harry the Great before deserved no less. Diliana fortunately has the answer for that, and one that is found aplenty on the magically saturated shorelines of the Green Isle. What Diliana needs now is potions. 3 months before the Harvest Festival of Riverrun, the God's Eye, the Isle of Faces, ancient legends and folktales throughout Westeros tell a lot about this place. It is said that here the last of the Green Men dwells, first men whose families made pacts with the enigmatic children of the forest in a time when the worship of the old gods are still prevalent among the Neck. It is said that here lies the last of the weirwood trees in the south. The children of the forest might be gone, but the Green Men, the descendants of the first men who made the first pact, still maintain the groves. It is said that those who dare cross the waters and fogs of the God's Eye with ill intent on the last remnant of the old gods disappear. Followers of the Seven, for 1,000 years, had attempted many times to enter this sacred place with the purpose of cutting off the following of the worship of the old gods down south. None of them ever returned. As for those, however, who came with holy purpose, it is said that when they return from their pilgrimage from the Isle, they are forever changed. They know things that were, things that are, and things that will be touched by the old gods, would be the most common reasoning that would be prevalent on everyone else. Thus, however, as the Andal religion of faith of the Seven spread, lesser and lesser are the visitors of the God's Eye until it is a place to be avoided by most. Only the occasional northerner or mountain tribesmen tend to visit its foggy shores throughout the decades. A 6-year-old girl stands on the shore of the God's Eye. For anyone looking, she might have looked like 10 or 12 in appearance, a youth on her way to be a young lady. Behind her at 10 guards bearing the familiar livery of House Wen at the moment until Deliana comes of age, making sure that they are as far as possible from the shores of the foggy lake. Most of them have heard about the legends about what happened to many people that dare tread on these shores. As far as they are concerned, this is the farthest that they dare to step foot on, Lord's orders or not. While her guards are ready to shit themselves in trepidation and nervousness, Diliana is the exact opposite. She almost laughs as she can once more feel magic touching her skin. Back from her world, magic is everywhere on the planet due to the hidden society, living among muggles. Here, however, there is nothing left of magic residue only echoes. Here, however, in the God's Eye, the magic is still strong. The children of the forest might be gone, but the touch they left on the earth, coupled with the caretaking of the green men, are still remembered by the land. Wherever latent magic thrives, it always affects plants and animals. Thus, the ingredients that might be used for the art of potion making. Snape sucked as an instructor and as a teacher for potion sabotaging hundreds of graduates that fail his class due to his strictly high standards and abysmal teaching method. Delana, as Harry before, had also been desensitized by liking the art, thanks to him. However, he quickly got the attractiveness of potion making once again, thanks to Fleur Delacour, after she realized his abysmal skills to it. Suffice it to say that it is extremely different when you have a sexy Vila instead of slimy Bat as your professor. Plus, the rewards at every end of the night is incentive enough. With potions, you can bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper to death. If you have the patience and the skills for it. Delana murmurs to herself as her eyes take notice of the plants found at the shoreline of the God's Eye. She is extremely pleased as she notices familiar plants that would be used as raw ingredients for the potions she plans to make. She has to admit she had been worried that the magical plants in this world would be different, and thus she would need to experiment and start from scratch. This way, though, she can save time and focus on her other projects. 30 minutes, that is all that it takes for her to finish harvesting the needed magical plant ingredients. With a well-placed and modified cutting charm, you seriously didn't expect her to start pulling plants like Dirty Muggle did you, and placing them on the bottomless bag enchanted to preserve the magical plants at her hip. She had prepared it beforehand. No point bringing around a baggage train when you can have one simple one. Lessens the chances of being attacked by robbers or bandit and wasting valuable time. Plus, it would raise a lot of questions once people start asking why in the world is she collecting plants in the God's Eye? Speaking of which, though, I believe it is better if you boys don't remember what you've seen, right? She smiled at the 10-man escort from Harrenhal who were huddled among each other, terrified after seeing her use magic out in the open. Add the fact that they are at the God's Eye and their brains are making up their own conspiracy theories inside their heads. Nothing personal, boys, but a chess mistress does not like her fingers to be seen moving at the board. Obliviate! With a wave of her hand, 10 pairs of eyes roll at their eye sockets as the memory charm takes effect before they thudded on the ground together. When they wake up later, they would be kicking each other for sleeping on the job and leaving the future Lady of Harrenhal defenseless. Delana would rather keep the use of her magic in secret. It's not because of the fear, mind you. No, far from it. What's the point of showing off your hand, after all, if there's no good reason for it? Better hide it and watch the simpletons rack their brains as they try to piece a puzzle that has all the wrong shapes on each other. So it's true, the sudden words catches Delana off guard, and she nearly Avada Kedavra, the source of the sound, if not for her tripping at her new invention high heels, blast this accursed new form that she is trying to get used to before the Harvest Festival. As it is, she ashamedly fell on her butt as she glares at the person, or rather, people standing behind her. One look at them, and she immediately knew that they are the Green Men, the guardians of the God's Eye. She hums to herself, though, as she eyes them. She expected people wearing swamp rags with seaweed on their hair. What she doesn't expect are people who looks a lot cleaner, even washed hair and combed correctly, and even dressed on what seems to be clean linen robes in green with wooden sandals on their feet. All in all, they are far better looking than any small folk or landed knight in this medieval world she has been thrown at. "You're the Green Men, I suppose," Delana says, standing up and dusting off the wisps of grass that clings to her pants. She refuses to wear a dress unless for reasons specific to her. Mentally, though, she kicks herself. Kingsley would throw his ass at the training regimen for not paying attention to his surroundings. Normally being confronted by 10 strangers in the middle of nowhere on a place infamous for kidnapping would raise red flags for any single woman. Delana, however, is no normal person. She is Harry Potter the Great. The moment these 10 show any signs of hostility, they would be killed in 12 different ways, according to her whim. She will listen to them for now, though. It is not every day you meet people with magic on their blood, no matter how diluted. "We are," the eldest among the small group of 10, answers. He looks about a man in the late 60s, but showing none the signs of any sickness yet, if his ramrod back is any indication. My apologies for startling you, my lady, but we felt your power all over the God's Eye Isle. We have come to see what and who it is that contains so much magic at our borders. You know me? Deliana simply glares at them. The elder chuckles at that. Your castle can be seen even at the God's Eye due to how big it is, my lady. We make it a point to know what's going on with the lands closest to us. You mean spying? More like observing, my lady, the elder replies. Caution is always necessary, and only a fool would trust himself safe, even if he does not know the happenings of the world around him. Wise words. Thank you, my lady, the elder says with a bow. I forgot my manners. I am Victor, the elder at our village, and our representative. I used Billy Nye, Victor, Lord of Vampires, as character representation for the elder of the Green Men. Not a lord? Diliana asks, truly surprised. She had lived long enough in Westeros to know that every patch of land in this world belonged to a lord of some sort. No, my lady, Victor replies with a smirk. Simply an old man entrusted with a huge responsibility. I see, Diliana raises her chin up, befitting her station as she crosses her arms. I doubt, however, Lord Victor, that you ambush people without reason, no matter their importance here at the edge of the Lake of the God's Eye. What do you want from me? Astute observation, my lady. Victor grins at her. Diliana personally thinks it looks more akin to a wolf showing its fangs rather than a smile of a man. It is a smile both proud and deadly. You're right, I simply do not stop strangers. In fact, we do not stop strangers at all. Unless, of course, those who comes with a nefarious reason. No, my lady. We came here, all 5 of us, to check if you are the one that we have been waiting. So long as our first ancestor who lived on this isle had prophesied. Pardon me, your ancestor. Yes, Victor affirms. He who established the first Night's Watch and its first Lord Commander, the one whose surname became the signature of all black brothers. The one who made sure that the friendship between the first men and the children of the forest remained strong. The one who was always serious, but always laughed. Eyes as dark as the gray clouds of night, whose magic was strong like yours. He who told that one day someone like him will appear wielding magic as powerful as he did, and one that will appear in a time of upheaval and chaos, when darkness will once more swallow the world. His command that maintained from generation to generation that we, the last of those who knew magic, aid you in their endeavor once you appear. He who was respected above all and brother to Brandon Stark, first of his name Sirius Black. Freddie is a simple carpenter working at Hold's Hamlet, a small homestead of 15 families that form a small community a little bit away from Harrenhal. His entire life he had lived under the shadow of the enormous ruin of a castle. He is a carpenter like his father and his father before him. Now, however, with the sudden change of leadership, when the new heir of Harrenhal, Lady Deliana Tully, arrived, things start to change. She begins what she calls education, which require every person with a trade to attend the moment she arrived from the God's Eye. Creepy place, that is. Unnatural. For Freddie, it is both weird and astonishing. He never fully learned or studied like most of the High Lord. Most of the skills he has, he learned by observing his father work. Now here comes these green men, tall people, a head above everyone else, who have an addiction to wearing green robes, only acting as teachers. Freddie, of course, was wary at first. There are terrifying stories and legends, after all, about the God's Eye and the green men that call it home. It doesn't help that the green men assigned to their education started teaching on what he called math and science and measurement, plus some other basic stuff about the world around him that he never expected in his life to know. 2 weeks later, and here Freddie is supervising a group of men making beams from raw wood, barking strict orders. Before he is simply a dumb carpenter with a talent for making and designing small stuff required of him by the hamlet or sometimes at the castle. With the things he learned, though, Freddie nurtured his innate talent to skill, making him rise from the simple carpenter he was to the avid designer he is. Unlike some, he had keen eyes, a great imagination, and meticulous when it comes to measurement that made him immediately rise through the ranks of being a supervisor. Surprisingly, along the way, he realized also has a good head when it comes to supervising. Thus, here is the impromptu manager of the 60 or so workers carrying stuff and crafting them. Hold's Hamlet is already expanding rapidly. Once there are 30 people here that call it home, now it is more like 1,000 forest dwellers, small hamlets, and other families from nearby lands gathered here as the rumor started that the Lady Deliana Tully discovered a new mine at a hill not far from Hold's hamlet, with the promise of fair work and good wage, plus safety in the form of numbers. It attracts many small folk, obviously. It helps that, with the influx of people, more guards are recruited by the lady's orders to keep the peace. Now, Hold's hamlet is changed. There is a sewing shop manned by the group of ladies that did also education, now sewing off clean leather clothes of brown and green. There's the brewers, the farmer's hall, where the farmers gather to rest and trade stories. There is the guardhouse, the village master's office, the education halls, the bathhouses, which is thankfully free in price, connected to an aqueduct, personally built by the green men, the miners' recruiting stand, the market stands, the storehouses, and finally, the Carpenters' Guild house built alongside the Builders' Guild. All of these, plus the houses need new houses and furniture. Thus, Freddy the Carpenter, the once not important person of the hamlet, is now in extremely high demand, plus the pay is good. Already he is the one hiring carpenters and builders to cope with the influx of work. He is just happy tonight, though, for receiving the news that after the demand of houses and furniture, there would be another project, a direct message from the lady demanding each hamlet to build a palisade wall with a moat on each of them for protection against raiders and bandits. Sitting now on his own personal office at the guild drinking beer, Freddy raises his cup at the air. For Lady Delana Tully, long may she reign, around the lands of Harrenhal. 5 different budding town leaders and residents are also raising their glasses in her name. But Delana sits at her own private solar, sipping with content the black coffee that is now available in her larder. To say that her trip to the God's Eye is fruitful would be the understatement of the century. She went there expecting at best her finding all the plant ingredients that she might require for the potions that she might need in order to completely strengthen her hold on her territory. Instead, however, she gained an entire village of magic users who are fanatically loyal to her. Wherever you are, you magnificent bastard, I want you to know that you are the best godfather ever. Delana thinks to herself as she watches below the workers repairing the foundations of Harrenhal quickly doing their work. She has no idea how Sirius knew that she would come in this world, but he knew. Must be old blood. Somewhere along the line of old traditional magical families, the gift of seers can be sometimes present, whatever the reason though. She is grateful. The Green Men, suffice it to say, is a massive step up of help for her. She will never admit it, but she is never the greatest when it comes to domestic magic and stuff, even in her previous life. Harry, after all, before was a fighter, trained and literally born to vanquish dark wizards. In his late life, majority of his skills lie more on that field. There was no reason, after all, to learn the intricacies of how to make clothes from scratch, fertilizer to keep crops growing, and other things more like that. The modern age had plenty of people doing it, many even specializing in it, so there was never a reason to put enough effort about learning it. Worse, in the magical world, there was magic to rely to which tends to apply shortcuts about the things that muggles need to make life comfortable. The only reason that Delana now had even an inkling about many of the mundane stuff that she is applying right now in this world is because of her rather unappealing childhood at Durskaban. She never knew that she would benefit from being treated like a house elf for years by her relatives. Here's to you, you prejudiced people. May you look at me now from whatever hell you are in and be horrified. She mentally cackles to herself. The Dursleys, after all, had been found by old Voldy's followers and had been strung up like the fat hogs they were. Now the Green Men takes over much of the mundane stuff. They might not have something as strong as her magic, but they were taught by their parents, whom were taught by Sirius. Now they are spreading their knowledge about the mundane stuff, like building better homes made of concrete, stone and wood instead of straw and mud, cemented streets, pottery, art, agriculture propagation, boat making, which they are excelling at, dressmaking of a higher quality instead of the rags that the small folk wore, brewing of butterbeer and fire whiskey, vodka and 1,000 different other wines. Sirius had left an heirloom of an encyclopedia about it. Baking of modern-style bread, and best of all, plumbing. No more throwing of your own shit. Finally. Now she expects that by the time the improvements are finished, the lands of Harrenhal would not look like the damn Dark Ages anymore in lifestyle, but be more akin to pre-Renaissance. What she needs, though, is more people. Already, the spreading of rumors about the soon-to-be open mines are bringing people by the hundreds all over looking for work. She needs more, though, and she plans to wait a bit before the last part of her short-term plan, before the Harvest Festival at Riverrun comes. She had assigned Elder Victor, the chief of the Green Men, her personal laboratory she had created before at the Welcome Hall of the Ruined Castle, to start the production of nutrition potions laced with loyalty potions keyed to her. No traitors on her ranks. She's adamant about it. In the long run, later, no subject of Lady Delana would utter a word about her, no matter how much skin Lord Bolton peel off. The Green Men are the only ones free of this mandatory behind the dark scheme. They already see her as a messianic figure. It gets no better than that. She looks at the map of the Riverlands at her wall, especially, however, to the 3 houses to the north and east of Harrenhal. Houses Root, Derry, and Wood. She wants their lands, and Dillionite just has the plan on how to get it without anyone suspecting her. Sir Merrick Root massages his temple, feeling the familiar start of the headache that seems to be plaguing him ever since last week. Things have been bad, to say, in this part of the countryside in the past few days or so. They came out of nowhere, hundreds of fat, giant, long-headed birds squawking and honking like a demented tide. They are like nothing he had seen before. Originally, he thought they were just giant chickens. Unfortunately, they became honking, loud giant chickens that developed a taste for vegetation. Vegetation, precisely, that were the farm fields of House Root. Farmers had abandoned fields in a panic as the tidal wave of giant chickens ravaged farm after farm, like a plague eating everything they can get their beaks on. His young son, Lucas, led a valiant charge against the overgrown birds with Sir Andre Charlton and 50 men. He learned the hard lesson that fighting oversized angry chicken by the hundreds, if not thousands, is not a wise plan at all. No matter how much covering you had in plate, those nasty beaks and claws tend to find the softest part of you that they can reach. Once you riled them, the 50 of them returned covered in feathers, claws, and scratches, with Sir Alton missing an eye. Jousting a tidal wave of them was apparently not the brightest idea. Ever since then, the rampaging horde had only been delayed by dozens of his men-at-arms with crossbows and bows. The only weakness of the giant chickens was that they move slowly from place to place, and the men of House Root can take them down from afar before they were swarmed. Still, it was not enough. There were too many giant chickens and too little guardsmen and arrows in storage for that matter. And just in time for the harvest feast, too, he mentally wails. Lord Tully would not be happy that their current quota is half less than half of what they usually send. He mentally groaned as he can feel his age while leaning on his chair. He was up to his neck, literally, by complaints of the small folk about the sudden bovine invasion on their land. Seeing that the majority of the livelihood of the Riverland small folk was farms, he had literally a large number of them waiting for him to do something. It was not happening to him alone. At his table were 2 pieces of paper delivered by Raven. Apparently, houses Derry and Woad were also suffering the same chicken infestation. The former had tried burning them out by using riders with torches, but what they accomplished was to simply burn their own fields on the effort. House Woad had adapted his tactics also on delaying the enemy, and like him, had small amounts of success. Of course, he can always ask for help from the Lord Paramount in order to rally the other lords for aid. However, explaining to them that he is being defeated by chickens is to large a blow to his pride. Problem solved or not, his house would be a laughingstock for generations to come. No, that is his last resort, only if he cannot find other alternatives. Said alternative, however, leaves a bad taste to his mouth. Of course, other than martial strength, he had also consulted with the maester of his house about a probable solution for this animal invasion. His maester, unsurprisingly, is less than useless about it. Not only didn't he know how to deal with the overlarge bovine invaders, he also had no idea what they were. Now that he thinks about it, so did the other maesters of Derry and Woad. Thus the reason why he, Sir Raymond Derry, and Sir Willis Woad are here at his Welcome Hall, sitting together as they await their guest and only probable solution. He spared a glance at the other 2 lords and winced. Their armor and clothes had seen better days, and Sir Willis even had grains clinging to his hair. He, like him, must had also tried saving his grain personally from the unending tide. With the knowledge of the Meisters and the Citadel useless, and a heroic charge can do more ill than good, Sir Muric Root turned to their last option, the brilliant, legitimate bastard of House Tully. Of course, like everyone else in Westeros, he knows who the girl is. It is not every day, after all, for the Citadel to sing praises of someone not a Meister, much less a girl of 6. He might not have believed it, also, if not for the confirmation of his own Meister. Now here he is awaiting for her, after receiving her confirmation to solve their problem and promise of silence in the matter. It galled him, of course, and Sarah Reimagined in particular, to ask for help from the former bastard of Tully. Brilliant or not, she was a bastard after all, and history had made it clear as day that associating with bastards always ended in tragedy in the long run. Of course, for the latter, any Derry simply hated the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Not surprising, since House Derry supported the Targaryen dynasty during Robert's Rebellion, and lost a lot because of it. Still, despite their grievances and personal opinions, they are lords, and it is their duty to put their feelings aside in order for the improvements and survival of their houses. Of course, it is doubly important when said houses are in danger of being bankrupted. Agriculture is the primary resource of the Riverlands, and it just won't do when your granaries are being drained dry by animals. The sound of a horn sounding and the call of his herald brings Sir Muric Root out of his musings as the first of the riders enter the wooden palisade of his home. Like all Riverlanders, the riders wore a combination of hard leather and pieces of steel. The first of them, however, carries the familiar yellow and black of House Wen. To his surprise, though, he found among the riders a tall young girl with light reddish-pink hair tied to a bun, riding a white horse. She is wearing a comfortable riding attire, loose brown pants on her long legs, and a white undershirt with a light chainmail cuirass for protection. A cloak of green also covers her upper body and protecting her modesty beneath. It is an attire men normally wear, not noble ladies. Sir Muric blinks as he watches the girl being helped down by one of her escorts off the saddle. He knows, of course, that this is the Tully bastard. No family in Riverrun has that familiar trace of red on their hair. However, his brain spins inside his skull. Last he heard, the Tully bastard is 6 days old, not looking like 12. Yet, here she is, looking like in the early stages to being a young woman instead of her original age. He can clearly see that she will be a beauty in the future. Though, and frankly, Sir Muric is not surprised. Lady Catelyn and Lady Lysa are beauties in their prime, and it seems the Tully bloodline once more did not disappoint. He can hear Siched Raymond beside him grinding his teeth at the sight of her. He stomps on the knight's foot to keep him quiet. The last thing that Siched Muric wants now is for him to ruin this. They need the bovine infestation gotten rid of, and if the bastard girl has a solution, he will damn well swallow his pride. Lord Root, Lord Derry, Lord Woad, she greets them as she stands in front of them. He frankly notices that she neither curtsied nor bowed to them. Beside him he can hear, once more, the Derry turning his teeth to dust. Lady Tully, Woad, thankfully has a better political sense than the Lord of Derry. It is a pleasure to have you here, and the help you have promised. Of course, and I do want my promised fair compensation, of course, she replies with her own smile. Sir Muric can literally feel his face struggling to smile. Of course, the help of the bastard does not come for free. In exchange for getting rid of the weird-looking chickens, the bastard had asked, in payment, that she be able to set up money-lending booths on their lands and main towns alongside with a market stall on each location, tax-free. He almost said no. The last thing that he wants is to be plagued with angry protests from the local merchants about the new competition. However, of course, 2 granaries were overrun and more Muric was forced to acquiesce to the demand. So, shall we get inside then to discuss as to how exactly you are going to get rid of us of our plaguing problem? Sir Muric begins only to be surprised as the young girl laughs out loud. No need, Sir Muric. On my way here, I have already sent the wagons and the traps with the lure that would bring all your turkey issues out of your hands and lands. Come tonight, your lands would be free of them. You can tell the farmers and small folk that took refuge in your towns and villages that they can once more return to their homes. Sir Muric blinks at that, temporarily speechless at her declaration. You resolved it already, he asks. Judging by the disbelief on Lord Derry and Woad's face, they are also doubting her words. It took us a lot of effort to slow them down, and you say you've killed them all already? He has been expecting a poison solution from her at least. And what the hell is a turkey? That's where you're wrong, Lord Root. I never said I'd killed them. I've redirected them, says the Lady Deliana. I've sent wagons at the edge of your territories with some of my trusted aides. I've invented some potions that will draw thee out from your lands to the wagons where they will be caged and escorted out. How did you... The bastard simply smiles at them with that ever-present smile, as if she knows something they don't, which she probably does. How I learned about them is simple. My lord, I read a lot. And besides, my purpose here is to solve your problem, and I do it discreetly, is it not? I never promised exactly that. I need to share or tell of my methods on doing it. The Cerameric Root can literally say no words as his brain tries and fails to make sense of what he is hearing. The girl arrived here and not less than 5 minutes solved the issue that is literally taking the combined efforts of 3 houses, judging by the gobsmacked expressions of the Lord Wen and Woad. They are also suffering on the same boat as he is. Of course I do expect your hospitality, Lord Root. It has been a long ride, and I'm famished. Tonight, we'll discuss the payment agreed before, she declares, heading towards his home, with her guards following her with every eye looking at her in disbelief and awe. Now where's that bread and salt? I'm tired and I'm hungry already, she declares loudly, making Ser Marek's sweat drop as she stomps on her grounds, feeling more at home than he is right now. And halls of Harrenhal. 3.5 months before the harvest feast of the Riverlands, Deliana cackles in glee as she throws herself on her newly improved feather bed, a small courtesy of the small folk in exchange for the prosperity she is leading them. To say the least, that she is happy is an understatement. Now I know why most puffs prefer doing hard work instead of using magic as a shortcut. There is that feeling of success that only comes when you put effort on something instead of cheating your way through it. Of course, everything is orchestrated by her. It took her nearly her entire power summoning all the turkeys north of the wall to an abandoned patch at Harrenhal. Seeing the fact that the entirety of anything north of the wall remains unexplored for plenty of obvious reasons like weather, animals and the cannibalistic wildings, and very few south of the wall has an interest in it, the region remains a mystery to many. Fortunately not for her. The diary and pseudo-encyclopedia left behind by Sirius to the Green Men is a major source of information for Deliana when it comes to the lands north of the wall. It is an untapped land and one she plans to take full advantage later. For now, though, she'll settle for turkeys. Suffice it to say that it worked like a charm. Literally, a double dose of Fury Potion coupled with Thirst Draft poured on their watering troughs, and you've got rabid, hungry turkeys wanting to eat everything in sight. It is a simple matter, then, on dropping them on the lands of Root, Darry, and Woad. A week later, their lords are sending her desperate messages for help about dealing with the infestation of their lands after the failure of their maesters on finding a solution. She is, after all, the genius of the Citadel and probably their nearest and only option. Now here she is with 3 written writs at her hand with their signatures as a reward that she can establish her loaning booths alongside market stalls that would be selling some of her precious Dillionite in their raw form. Now one might ask, why did she ask for so little after so much an effort about the turkey scheme? Let it not be said that Deliana isn't one without a plan. Always. She can, after all, sell jewels made of Dillionite directly instead of simply in its most basic form. There's a reason for that. You see, her true aim is not to simply gain money or gold. She can get that easily in the long run later. Nor is it her purpose to simply put a competition against the markets of the 3 houses. No, what Deliana needs most of all is the entirety of their lands. Sure, Harrenhal is already widespread and large in terms of land tract. However, it has no natural defenses, and one can literally march an army straight through its plains without worry. Once she controls these 3 houses, not only does she will have buffer territories against the Vale, she would gain access through the sea by Maidenpool and High River access. She would also be controlling a main part of the King's Road that passes through. She does not want, however, to have any direct hand in her plans to control the area. The most efficient way of bringing down your enemy is stabbing through the heart. However, the most elegant of executions does not target the obvious. No. Sometimes one must need to target the veins that lead to the heart. The heart will be dead all the same. The purpose of the market area she requested is because it would be the main trading area for Dillionite. Of course, unsaid would be the small fact that the most avid gossipers of her small folk and completely fed misinformation beforehand would be manning the stalls. It would not be a long shot for the lords of the three houses to know that Dillionite can be mined at the hills of the Riverlands, which many of them had. After the rather high amount of damage that the Turkey invasion in their lands made, it would not be a long shot for them to be trying to find the mineral for themselves on their own lands in order to recuperate from their previous loss. Of course, they would not find any, but the point is they would be borrowing a lot of money on the nearest source, which is her loaning offices. They are, after all, adamant that they keep the damage of the Turkey invasion a secret in order to save face and reputation. Mining is a risky and money-consuming business, and one always need a good startup investment if he plans to gain any success. Seeing that they obviously have little money and prefer that no word gets out, her loan offices would be their only choice, their last choice. Of course, there is absolutely no Dillionite on their hills, but it would be fun watching them desperately claw for any income to recover from their losses. Once they declare bankruptcy, which would be obvious in another month, he expects the Lord Paramount would auction their lands off after their incompetence, and Delana, already having an interest in the area, would be there to reap the harvest. It would be such a waste if she does not create Dillionite mines with transmutation on already available open holes. On the hills, right. She has big plans, and like it or not, she plans to fulfill them no matter who gets trampled along the way. Of course, she is not dumb and willing to leave everything to chance, no. The raw Dillionite she is soon about to sell are laced once more with compulsion charms and attracting charms. It would be her little nudge in order for them not to deviate on their road to self-implosion. Might is magic, after all. What to do at the moment, though, she wonders to herself. The daily improvement of the lives he controls under Harrenhal is being handled step by step by the Green Men. No need for her to step in unless some kind of emergency arises. The farm and mine productions of Harrenhal are also ongoing and needs time to bear fruit. The renovation of Harrenhal's main supports for the creation of the new seat of power is also ongoing alongside her steady supply line of cement and stone. The aqueducts are also being built, heading to the 5 towns. All in all, what she needs to do now is to sit and wait her ass until her projects finish themselves. Delana is never one to sit still, though. Better find a reason to keep growing while she still can without the judgmental and observing eyes of some of the more important people in this continent. Once she emerges from her shell and declaring herself to the world, it would be in a position of strength, not a still improving one. A bird squawking as it flies over the air makes Delana remember something that she almost forgot due to the focus she's putting on the 3 houses she's about to gain. Currently, she's still got thousands of turkeys in wagon loads north of Harrenhal. She mentally groans. She has almost forgotten them. Of course, now that their main purpose is done, she can always put them back to the north via Portkey. Why, however, waste a resource when it literally is simply sitting there? She is already investing Harrenhal to be trading exotic food and agricultural products after the harvest feast. Maybe it's high time she includes the startup of husbandry alongside it. The north of Harrenhal is empty plain lands with many winding small streams and rivers. She can start up her pens and coops for the turkeys there. She mentally groans, though. This means that she would need to be enticing small folk with skills among chickens to come work for her. She's got the gold, but what she needs are workers that have a brain cell that can learn. Raising turkeys, after all, is a lot different from raising chickens. At least they would not be strangers to it. The last thing that Delana needs is for some idiot to accidentally cause a plague that might ruin her magical work. Seriously, transporting that large amount of turkeys are no easy task. Yes, she can spend her time on this. It beats simply sitting around doing nothing at the moment, though. She will take her break once things start to go her way. It is not today, however. Today she'll work, and tomorrow she'll celebrate. 2 months before the harvest feast of the Riverlands, the implosion that Delana expects takes much sooner than she expected to. Apparently, the damage caused by the Turkey invasion on the 3 houses was large and widespread enough that when the selling of the Dillionite mineral started, immediate inquiries about it from the 3 desperate houses start. Very few gold and silver mines can be found on the Riverlands due to its lack of mountains. So when the widespread rumor from the pre-planned gossipers sent to the assigned marketplaces at the lands of Woe, Derry, and Root started, the 3 lords did not waste borrowing as much money as they possibly can from the loan booths provided by Delana before starting half a dozen mine on each of their hills. Dillionite, after all, was the first of its kind and very beautiful to look at. Plus, it was easy to shape and bend. They were literally caught hook, line, and sinker. Of course, only to add fuel to the fire, the rumor that was spread was it was present on the hills of the Riverlands. If Delana was a decent person, she might have felt bad for the lords desperately mining for any sign of Dillionite on their lands. Dillionite, after all, as provided by the information of her pawns, stated that Dillionite can only be found if you dig deep enough. These only prompt the desperate targeted houses to borrow even more money to hire people and equipment in order to dig deeper into their hills. Mining, as stated before, was not cheap and required a lot of money, so the amounts they borrowed were quite substantial. Now that Delana thought about it, though, it felt kind of poetic. Fueled by greed and desperation, they were kind of literally digging the holes for their own graves. It only took them a month and a half before the weight of desperation and current blunders finally came crashing down on the three houses. With no money, no investment for the next farming season, and heavy with debt, the houses of Wood, Derry, and Root finally declared bankruptcy to the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. Normally, the Tullys would render aid for their bannermen at this point in time, either through monetary support or royal decree to at least postpone any loans that they might have made. At least that's what any competent Lord Paramount will do. Unfortunately for them, the current Lord Paramount, Hoster Tully, was getting on in years and tends to leave the running of the state to his son Edmure in an effort for the young man to learn his responsibilities. Edmure can be a bit competent, assuming that his father or uncle is there to be breathing down his neck. Left alone on his own devices, though, he is a disaster in making. The poor shit for brains tends to choose what is easy instead of what is right, and unfortunately, for him, Delana tends to capitalize on it in every way. The end result is currently in her hand, smugly sitting. It is basically a writ putting the houses of Woad, Derry, and Root under judgment of their Lord Paramount. Long story short, it demotes them from being lordly houses to simply knight houses due to their mismanagement of their lands. Normally, the Lord Paramount would support his bannermen, especially loyal ones, help them find ways to get back on their feet again. However, it would be long, arduous, hard works that require a lot of thinking and effort. Edmure chose not to subject himself to that and instead acquiesced to her counter-proposal that gave him an easy way out and little to nothing to do except sign it. Delana might be Edmure's half-sister, and he hated her due to her status as a bastard. However, he preferred his comforts more rather than his opinion of disgust to her due to the circumstance of her birth. Delana's proposal is actually quite simple. Due to the simple fact that the three houses loaned from her a great deal amount of money, their rather impoverished lands would be her collateral instead of finding new lords for them. Of course, she would not kick them out, but rather she would employ them under her as her knights. The lands, however, and its banners would be registered on her name as the future Lady of Harrenhal. Suffice it to say, the territory that falls under Harrenhal now includes the former territory of Houses of Woad, Derry, and Root, thus securing the majority of her eastern borders and giving her wide river access to the sea. Plus, of course, she has great plans for those houses in the long run. First and most immediate, though, is the problem that arose out of nowhere. The turkey population that she had penned up north in 3 great warehouses were causing a ruckus. The thousands of turkeys apparently did not appreciate being put into close proximity with one another with very little space of freedom to move freely. It resulted to fights that left hundreds dead of the birds. To alleviate this issue, Delana had most of her people working there separate the temperamental birds to different groups to prevent their impromptu civil war into escalating even further. Even then, she had to drug most of them with sleep potions, since they were so many, and the lands north also had farms and homesteads of their own who did not appreciate the rather large amount of avian intrusion. Now, however, that she got the lands of the 3 other houses, she can slowly trickle the large birds into those areas and give them the space they need. She makes a mental note to only let her people from Harrenhal be the only ones to take care of them, though. She bets that the small folk populace, especially the farmers of those lands, had already forgotten the rather damaging impact that the turkeys did to their crops and livelihood. The last thing that she needed was for some hot-headed fool trying to murder her new source of income and reputation. That reminds her she needs to increase her supply of loyalty potions more. The green men in charge of potion making at her own private labs are surprisingly efficient on their work, thankfully. She had tried teaching them some basics of her magic before to check if they would be capable of doing it. Also, unsurprisingly, they are not. Maybe it's because of the land or this new world having a different form of magic source, but the sad fact is they cannot perform the same feats as she does. She did not waste time thinking about it, though. Finding out mysteries and answers was more Hermione's thinking than his. The green men took this road bump way harder than she expected. Thus, she introduced them to arithmancy, rune carving, transmutation, and potion making. After all, one only needs skill, a bit of magic on your blood, a powerful medium, and sacrifice, at least for transmutation and runes, to be exemplary at it. They almost jumped into the aforementioned fields with zealotry. They apparently did not really appreciate that they shared nothing with their aforementioned messiah. Now here they are, some of the best potioneers and transmutation talented men and women she has ever seen. In her personal opinion, they even put Snape to shame if judged by the quality of their work. Dozens upon dozens of potions are being shipped off from her personal laboratory every day. Most of these are loyalty potions, which is a mandatory thing for everyone from smallfolk, Desmond, to the common hedge knight to drink once a month. As said before, the last thing that Dillionite does not want to expect from her subjects is betrayal. Coupled with the loyalty potions are the usual strengthening, nutrition, and growth boosters that are reserved only for the populace of Harrenhal. Frankly, it is a spur-of-the-moment, brilliant idea from her, if she does say so herself, to be recognized as the great. Once more, she needs to stand apart from the regular random lord or lady in this world. While she can do that easily enough with herself, she can be more than before. To be more precise, if she lifts up her loyal subjects to higher heights, then she can be put into a pedestal higher due to her being their ruler. Yes, she can work on that. Never in the entirety of Planados would there be a people like those who are ruled by Lady Deliana, Tully directly. The world will know the name of Harry the Great. I meant Deliana the Great. Victor, or rather Lord Victor, as he is now known by the majority of the populace, breathes in the serene air as he looks down on the budding town that was once Hold's hamlet. Things are in schedule as far as he is concerned. Gone were the muddy tracks that were the substitute for roads before. Deliana had specifically mentioned beforehand that each of the new towns be all stone and concrete when it comes to their road system. Something about faster trade and transport. As usual, their benevolent messiah was right alongside her other reforms about the rather new designs required for the settlements. The people, of course, at first had been rather skeptical of the changes around them. It was practically demanded of them, after all, to demolish their old homes. Anyone would be upset and angry at that. However, they were small folk, and it was their duty to obey their lord. Suffice it to say that 2 weeks later, and all sorts of protests about the order for the settlements died down. Why should they continue protesting, after all? Each family had a house of concrete of their own. No more thatched roof, or barely standing walls that could be broken down by a strong gust of wind with enough space for 5 children. No more muddy, dirty ground full of shit and mud that goes into your feet, no matter how thick your boots were due to the new stone-paved way roads. Each house also had a toilet of its own, a marvel of engineering made by pipes, introduced by their new lady using a design interconnected by popes. That means no shitting anymore anywhere on the road or throwing your shit outside your homes via bucket. Anyone caught doing it was assigned on dung patrol. The farmers, after all, on the surrounding areas always loved it when someone was shoving dung on the ground instead of them. Bathhouses were now also common on the towns. It was a measly 10 pennies for anyone to take a bath. It was a novelty for many of the small folk whose bath schedule were once a month, others even less. Suffice it to say that the bathhouses were a tremendous hit. Almost everyone gathered there many times a week to cleanse themselves, connect with friends, make business, or even stage impromptu bragging. Other than the bathhouses, there were also many other buildings rising on the towns. There were the marketplaces where the merchants gather and where folks buy and sell their produce. There were the 101 businesses by the Craftsman Guild, like pottery, the carver, the carpenters, the brewery, the inn, and many more that kept the town's economy rolling. There were the mercenary guilds, or aptly named Adventurers Guild. Sell swords, and other folk who love the outdoors register there. Small folk usually, or even hedge knights, go there to employ them for small quests like rabid wolves, bears, the occasional bandit and such. The only things that were prohibited as jobs by the guild, though, were reaving, raping, pillaging, basically the usual ones that could get your head chopped off. Located inside the town were also the guardhouse and its training area. Its main purpose was to house the guards protecting the town in the event of an invasion. Banditry, after all, was the adventurer's problem, and not the soldiers. The job of the guards, however, in these times of peace, was simply doing patrol, guard the gate, and man the wooden palisades surrounding the town. Of course, there was always the occasional drunk or troublemaker, but it was rare. Many dread doing dung duty after all. There are 5 of these new towns scattered around the Riverlands: Hold's Hamlet, Southwold, Goldenleaf, Sarkton, and Kirkwall, which bordered the west, and the only one whose walls is made of stone instead of a palisade. Many of them are still ongoing construction for their residents, though, and only Hold's Hamlet is complete. Across the territories of Harrenhal are dozens of homesteads, groups of farmers that own the massive farmlands that produce the rice and spices that would become the primary product of Harrenhal. It is another new order of things of their lady. Apparently she disagrees with the old practice of farmers being solitary in their homes, owning small patches of land. Apparently Delana groaned, mentioning something about recipe for bandits to attack before enacting the new protocol. A homestead is composed of almost 15 farmers' families living together. By decree, every one person of 5, girl or boy, be trained to fight at the local town to act as protection for their homesteads. Seeing that each small folk family in Westeros has an average of 3 to 10 children, it is quite a number on each homestead. These groups would be entrusted by large tracts of land to be their own for farmers and storage houses for miners. They would work it, and they would pay the 10% tithe demanded by the ruling house at Harrenhal. Each homestead is connected with one another by stone roads for easier transport. They would also be safe havens for the adventurers on their extermination missions, or chores, or the occasional patrol group of Harrenhal men. This is basically a fuck you for bandits. Contrary to popular belief, bandits are not well equipped, most of the time with the average wielding an unsharpened knife. Mostly, homesteads are provided by the best of the farming or mining equipment, which can be an impromptu weapon that is more dangerous than a bandit's, plus those that are chosen to train by the guard at the towns are given a shield, an axe, or a sword and chainmail, more than enough to challenge any opportunist. All in all, it is a new order of things that could be found only at the Free Cities and at King's Landing. Victor himself was awed and not the least bit of surprised in their founder's holy text, after all. It says, "The one who comes before the end would uplift his followers, and they shall stand a head tall from the rest of the world with no one there." Like, he feels privileged enough to be witnessing all these with his very own eyes. Better, the Lady Delana had assigned him the status as Castellan. Basically, he is the one in charge of everything that their lady built. It is of the greatest of honors to be chosen, and Victor would not disappoint. Dressed in opulent robes of black with trimmed gold veins as design, Victor looked every bit the lord he is called. To be more precise, he looked like a vampire newly awakened to feast on his enemies. Men parted as he walked back to the impromptu management office from his quarters. It is a wide space with a large table at the center. It has little of comforts and mostly Spartan in furniture. The management office, after all, is where things get done and dusted as quickly as possible, not one for lounging and relaxing. At the middle of the table, however, is a large map of Harrenhal with smaller 3-1s glued to it, representing the maps of the new territories sworn to Lady Delana. With a sigh, Lord Victor sits himself on the wooden chair, overlooking the large map at the table. Green pins mark the majority of the map of Harrenhal. These are the places where the improvements of Lady Dillionite are being implemented. White pins all over the places, meanwhile, are those that are soon to be implemented. Red, on the other hand, are those who have not yet been given thought. The Castellan of Harrenhal frowns as he zeroed in on the white pieces at the place of Harrenhal. The red pieces of the new territories are something that he not be concerned with. If his lady's memo be trusted, the problem with the Riverlands is that other than the rivers, is that it has no natural barriers other than the small rivers and the occasional keep or castle of the lord of the land. An army can march here unopposed with little to nothing to stop them. Add the fact that the population of the Riverlands is not as large as its side territories of the Westerlands and the Reach. It is another sombering issue. Of course, Victor's worry is only for Harrenhal and not the surrounding territories. He stares unhappily at the map. With the current population at Harrenhal, the castle can summon up to 5,000 levies thanks to its significant boost. Large tracts of the land are still uninhabited and can be used. Add the empty lands also of wood, dairy, and root, and he's got a large space with no one to work them. The old man mentally rubs his temple in stress. The most common way, of course, for them to gain more small folk is to publicize even more in order to attract them from the other lands. However, Delana made it clear that they not make big moves currently. It is a wise thing too. The last thing that they need right now is sniffing lords, wondering why in the world their small folk is migrating. The second choice for Victor to take is to send a letter to the lords and ladies of different houses, including King's Landing, asking for any beggar and homeless person they have to immigrate here. He would not do that for a plethora of reasons. First of all, he does not want unlearned peasants with no trade and skill simply living on the land with the barest idea how to propagate it. Secondly, majority of these would be people that are impoverished and would probably not be willing to transition immediately to a worker force that he needs. Thirdly is the issue of spies. With so much immigration, it would not be surprising if a fair number of them are the eyes and ears of other lords. No, what Victor needs is a workforce that have the skills that can automatically work without wasting time of learning the needed trade, but at the same time have zero affiliation with the current lords and ladies. It would also be a bonus if it would not earn the ire of any lords of Westeros. No lord, after all, likes their small folk running off them. Victor yawns and accidentally spills some of the maps at the side of the table. Grumbling to himself, he picks them up, cursing himself for being weary during work, only to stop as he sees the familiar drawing of Essos and that of the bastard daughters of Valeria. He can't help the loud laugh that leaves his lips as he holds the map. He is so engrossed of thinking of a solution when the answer is literally right in front of him the entire time. She stands up, though, with a familiar whistle bringing two of the other green men that have been hiding in the shadows to appear. Get me a raven. We will need our lady's permission to buy thousands of slaves from Essos, he declares with a wish of his black and gold robes. Matthew is the head of the Hammer and Stone Guild group of workers at Essos. They have always prided themselves on building fortifications fast and precise. Their services are mostly hired by generals as they specialize in building forts fast and demolishing them. Also, building fortifications in the middle of nowhere strong enough to resist a Dothraki charge fast is their specialization. Normally they're not into the castle making business. However, thanks to the large amount of gold they are being paid alongside with bags of the new soft diamond, as his men started to call Dillionite, he and his 3,000 crew traveled here in Westeros to renovate the ruins that is the castle of Harrenhal. While designing a castle is not exactly his specialty, he is not against the idea. After all, castles last for generations, and the names of their first architects and builders tend to stay. Imagine that, the name of Matthew Hammercoin, etched on generations. He is quite confident that he could finish the little lady's castle fast, especially with that liquid rock of heirs, and on time after he finally finishes the plans and setting up the foundations for the collapse of the ruin. However, he is terribly confused when all the little lady asked of him as a new design for the foundation of the new castle is almost a rendition of a plateau mixed with a small hill look-alike. He protested. Of course, he does not want his name to be remembered for building a random hill, that better designs can be made, but she had been adamant on her decision. However, seeing that she's paying him, Matthew acquiesced to her demands. If she wants to live in a hill, then so be it. He just makes a note to name Ellie, his second-in-command, to be the first builder of this castle. He does not want his name to be remembered for building a hill. Damn it.